7-year-old Maya Rodriguez clutched her paper bag of homemade cookies, the last treats her grandmother had baked before the electricity was shut off. She didn't know that the man in the expensive suit watching from his park bench had built an empire worth billions. She didn't know that her simple act of kindness would be witnessed by someone who could change her family's life forever. And she certainly didn't know that handing over her last cookie to a crying stranger would lead to the most unexpected phone call her mother would ever receive. But as Maya approached the sobbing woman on the bench, one question lingered in the autumn air. Could one small gesture of pure heart bridge the gap between crushing poverty and unimaginable wealth? Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park as Maya Rodriguez walked hand in hand with her mother, Carmen, along the winding path that cut through the heart of the city's only green space. Maya's small fingers clutched a wrinkled paper bag that contained 3 chocolate chip cookies, the last batch her grandmother had managed to bake before the gas company had disconnected their service 2 days ago. The cookies weren't much to look at, slightly lopsided and missing some chips where the dough had spread unevenly on the old baking sheet. But to Maya, they represented something precious, a final gift from her beloved abuela, who had passed away just 1 week earlier. Carmen Rodriguez worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment, cleaning offices downtown during the early morning hours and stocking shelves at the local grocery store in the evenings. But even with her tireless efforts, the bills kept piling up faster than she could pay them. The funeral expenses for Maya's grandmother had drained what little savings they had, and now they faced the very real possibility of losing their home within the month. Carmen tried to hide her worry from her daughter, but 7-year-old Maya was perceptive beyond her years and could sense the tension that seemed to follow them everywhere they went. "Mama, can we sit by the pond today?" Maya asked, her voice carrying the innocent hope that only children possess. "Abuela always said the ducks would remember us if we came back often enough." Carmen's heart ached at the mention of her mother, but she managed a small smile as she squeezed her daughter's hand. "Of course, mija. We have a little time before I need to get ready for work." They settled onto their usual bench, overlooking the small pond where a family of mallard ducks paddled lazily through the morning light. Maya carefully opened her paper bag and broke off small pieces of her precious cookies to throw to the eager birds that gathered at the water's edge. Each crumb she tossed represented a sacrifice, but the joy on her face as she watched the ducks scramble for the treats made Carmen's chest tight with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Across the park, seated on a bench beneath a towering oak tree, sat a man who looked entirely out of place in the modest neighborhood setting. Marcus Wellington III wore a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most people earned in 6 months, his Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early Sev hour. At 62 years old, Marcus had built his telecommunications empire from nothing, starting with a single cell phone repair shop and expanding it into a multinational corporation worth over $8 billion. He came to this park every morning, not because he lived nearby, but because it reminded him of the small-town park where he had played as a child before his family lost everything in his father's failed business venture. Marcus watched the young girl feeding the ducks with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper that he couldn't quite name. There was something pure about her movements, the careful way she rationed her treats to make sure every duck got some, the gentle patience she showed when the smaller ducks were pushed aside by the larger ones. He had spent the last 40 years of his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, who calculated every word and gesture based on what they hoped to gain, but this child's actions seemed motivated by nothing more than simple kindness. Maya had just thrown her last piece of cookie to a particularly persistent duckling when she heard the sound of quiet sobbing coming from a nearby bench. She looked up to see a woman in her 30s sitting alone, her shoulders shaking with the effort of trying to contain her tears. The woman's clothes were clean but worn. Her shoes had been re-soled at least twice, and her purse was clutched tightly in her lap as if she was afraid someone might snatch it away. "Mama," Maya whispered, tugging gently on Carmen's sleeve. "That lady is crying." Carmen followed her daughter's gaze and saw the woman, recognizing immediately the particular kind of despair that came from financial desperation. She had worn that same expression many times over the past few months, usually in the privacy of her own bathroom where Maya couldn't see her break down. Sometimes people have bad days, mija. It's not always something we can fix. But Maya was already standing up, her paper bag still clutched in her small hands. Maybe she's hungry, she said, with the simple logic of childhood. Abuela always said food makes everything a little better. Before Carmen could stop her, Maya was walking across the grass toward the crying woman, her small legs moving with determined purpose. Carmen started to follow, but something made her pause and watch from a distance, curious to see what her daughter would do. Maya approached the bench cautiously, the way she might approach a wounded animal that needed help but might be frightened by sudden movements. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely loud enough to be heard over the woman's quiet sobs. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, startled by the small voice, and found herself staring into the most sincere brown eyes she had ever seen. Maya's face was round and open, framed by dark hair that Carmen had braided that morning, and there was something in her expression that made the woman's tears slow despite herself. "Oh, sweetie," the woman said, trying to wipe her face clean with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just having a difficult day." Maya nodded sagely, as if she understood exactly what that meant. "My mama has difficult days too, especially since Abuela went to heaven. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping, but I always know because the walls in our apartment are really thin and I can hear everything." The woman, whose name was Sarah Mitchell, felt her heart constrict at the child's honest words. Sarah was a single mother herself, working as a waitress at a diner across town, while studying nursing at the community college in the evenings. Her car had broken down 3 days ago, the transmission finally giving out after 200,000 miles, and she had no way to get to work or school without it. The repair costs were far beyond her means, and she faced the impossible choice between fixing her car and paying her rent. "I'm Maya," the little girl continued, settling herself on the bench beside Sarah without being invited. "What's your name?" "Sarah," the woman replied, surprised by how much better she felt just having someone to talk to, even if that someone was only 7 years old. "It's nice to meet you, Maya." Maya carefully opened her paper bag and peered inside at the 2 remaining cookies. They were the last food she had brought with her, meant to be her lunch since there wasn't enough money for school meals this week. But looking at Sarah's tear-stained face, she felt something shift inside her chest. Her grandmother had always said that sharing what little you had was more important than keeping it all for yourself. And Maya understood with the clarity that sometimes comes to children, that Sarah needed these cookies more than she did. "Would you like a cookie?" Maya asked, holding out the bag. "My abuela made them before she died. They're not very pretty, but they taste like love." Sarah stared at the offered bag, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gesture. She could see that there were only 2 cookies left, could tell from Maya's worn clothes and the careful way she had been rationing crumbs to the ducks, that this was likely all the food the child had. "Oh, honey, I couldn't take your cookies. Those are yours." "But you're sad," Maya said simply, as if that explained everything. "And Abuela always said that when someone is sad, you should share what you have to help them feel better. Besides, I'm not very hungry today." The last part was a lie, and Maya's stomach chose that moment to rumble audibly, but she ignored it and continued holding out the bag with steady hands. There was something so pure about her offer, so genuinely motivated by nothing more than the desire to help, that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes again, though this time they were mixed with something warmer than despair. Marcus Wellington had been watching this entire exchange from his bench across the park, and he found himself leaning forward despite his usual inclination to mind his own business. He had seen countless acts of charity in his lifetime, most of them performed by wealthy individuals seeking tax deductions or public recognition, but there was something different about what he was witnessing now. This child was offering what appeared to be her last meal to a complete stranger, not because she hoped to gain anything in return, but simply because she recognized suffering and wanted to alleviate it. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to take food away from you." Maya nodded firmly and placed one of the cookies directly into Sarah's hand. "Abuela used to say that cookies taste better when you share them with someone who needs them," Try it and see. Sarah took a small bite of the homemade cookie, and despite its imperfect appearance, it was delicious, sweet and warm, with hints of vanilla and cinnamon. More than that, though, it carried with it the taste of love and care, the kind of nourishment that went beyond mere sustenance. "This is wonderful," she said honestly. "Your grandmother must have been a very special lady." "She was," Maya agreed, taking a bite of her own cookie. "She taught me that being rich isn't about how much money you have, it's about how much love you share. She said some of the richest people in the world are actually really poor because they forgot how to care about other people." End cough. The wisdom in those simple words hit Sarah like a physical blow, and she had to set her cookie down for a moment to compose herself. Here was this little girl, who clearly had nothing in terms of material possessions, offering profound life lessons along with her last piece of food. "Your grandmother sounds like she was very wise." "She was," Maya said again, but then her expression grew more serious. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetie. Why were you crying?" "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but sometimes talking about things makes them feel a little less heavy." Sarah looked into Maya's earnest face and found herself opening up in a way she hadn't with anyone in months. "I'm a mama too, like your mom over there. I have a little boy named Alex who's about your age, and I'm trying really hard to take care of him, but everything seems to be going wrong at once. My car broke down, and I can't afford to fix it, which means I can't get to work, and if I can't work, I can't pay my bills." Maya listened with the intense focus that children sometimes bring to adult problems, nodding in appropriate moments and asking gentle questions that showed she was truly trying to understand. "Where is Alex today?" she asked. "He's at school," Sarah replied. "I had to walk him there this morning because of the car, and then I was walking to the bus stop to try to get to my job, but I realized I didn't even have enough money for bus fare, and I just felt so overwhelmed that I had to sit down for a minute." "Walking is hard when you're sad," Maya observed, with the matter-of-fact tone she might use to comment on the weather. "Mama and I walk everywhere too, because we don't have a car either. Sometimes my feet hurt, but Mama says it's good exercise, and it gives us time to talk about important things." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, sharing the cookies and watching the ducks paddle across the pond. Maya seemed to be thinking about something serious, her small brow furrowed in concentration, and when she finally spoke again, her words were carefully chosen. "Sarah, do you think it would help if I gave you my other cookie? You could save it for Alex when he gets home from school. Mama always says that when kids are worried about their mamas, having a special treat helps them feel safer." The offer was so generous, so thoughtfully presented, that Sarah felt her composure crumble entirely. She pulled Maya into a gentle hug, mindful of the child's small frame, and let herself cry again, though this time the tears carried gratitude along with the pain. "You are the kindest little girl I have ever met," she whispered into Maya's hair. "But I can't take your last cookie. That's yours." "Please," Maya said, pulling back to look Sarah in the eyes. "Abuela always said that when you give something good away, something even better comes back to you. Maybe not right away, and maybe not in the way you expect, but it always comes back." I want to see if she was right. Marcus Wellington felt something crack open inside his chest as he watched this exchange. He had spent decades accumulating wealth, power, and influence, always telling himself that he would use his resources to help people once he had enough, once he had secured his own future completely. But somehow, enough had never come, and he had continued to build his empire while opportunities to help others passed by unnoticed. Now, he was watching a child who had virtually nothing demonstrate more genuine generosity in 5 minutes than he had shown in years. Sarah accepted the second cookie with trembling hands, understanding that refusing it again would somehow diminish the gift that Maya was trying to give. "Thank you," she said simply. "I will share this with Alex, and I will tell him about the kind little girl who gave it to me." "Will you tell him about Abuela too?" Maya asked hopefully. "I think she would like knowing that her cookies help someone feel better." "I will tell him everything," Sarah promised, and she meant it. She would remember this encounter for the rest of her life, would tell the story to Alex and to anyone else who needed to hear about unexpected kindness in dark times. Maya stood up from the bench, dusting cookie crumbs from her hands, and gave Sarah one more quick hug before returning to where her mother waited. Carmen had watched the entire interaction with a mixture of pride and concern, proud of her daughter's compassionate heart, but worried about their own precarious situation. "What were you doing over there, mija?" Carmen asked as Maya settled back onto their bench. "Sharing abuela's cookies with someone who needed them," Maya replied matter-of-factly. "Her name is Sarah, and she has a little boy like me, but her car is broken and she can't get to work. I gave her my cookies so she wouldn't be so sad." Carmen's throat tightened as she realized what her daughter had done. Those cookies were supposed to be Maya's lunch, the only food they had brought with them, but Maya had given them away without a second thought. "That was very kind of you, sweetheart, but what will you eat for lunch?" Maya shrugged with the casual acceptance that children sometimes show for their own discomfort. "I'm not that hungry. And besides, abuela always said that when you take care of other people, everything works out somehow." Marcus Wellington stood up from his bench across the park, his decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. He'd been struggling for months with how to begin giving back, how to use his wealth in meaningful ways rather than just writing checks to established charities where his contributions would disappear into administrative overhead. But watching Maya's selfless generosity had shown him exactly what real compassion looked like, and he knew he had to act. He approached the bench where Carmen and Maya sat, moving slowly so as not to startle them. Up close, he could see the worry lines around Carmen's eyes, the careful way she held herself that spoke of someone carrying burdens too heavy for her shoulders. Maya looked up at him with curiosity but no fear, her open expression suggesting that she saw only another person rather than his expensive clothes or obvious wealth. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice gentler than it had been in years of boardroom negotiations. "I hope you don't mind my interrupting, but I couldn't help but notice what just happened with the young lady over there." Carmen immediately tensed, her protective instincts flaring as she pulled Maya slightly closer. She had learned to be wary of strangers who paid too much attention to her daughter, especially well-dressed men who seemed out of place in their neighborhood. "Is there something we can help you with?" she asked politely but cautiously. "Actually, I was hoping I might be able to help you," Marcus replied, settling onto the bench beside them without invitation, his movements slow and non-threatening. "My name is Marcus Wellington, and I witnessed something remarkable just now that I'd like to talk to you about." The name meant nothing to Carmen, who didn't follow business news and had never heard of Wellington Communications, but something in his tone made her pause, rather than immediately gathering Maya up and leaving. "I'm Carmen Rodriguez, and this is my daughter Maya. What exactly did you think you witnessed?" Marcus smiled at Maya, who was watching him with the frank curiosity that children show when they're trying to figure out whether someone is friendly or not. "I saw your daughter give away what appeared to be her last meal to a stranger who was crying. I've been sitting in this park for over an hour. And in that time, I've watched dozens of people walk past that woman without stopping to help. But your daughter not only stopped, she gave away her own food to make someone else feel better." "Maya has a good heart," Carmen said carefully, still not sure where this conversation was heading. "But I'm not sure why that would be of interest to you." "Because," Marcus said, his voice taking on an intensity that made both Carmen and Maya pay closer attention, "I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who calculate every action based on what they hope to gain from it. I've built a company worth billions of dollars. And every day I deal with individuals who pretend to care about others while they're really only looking out for themselves. But your daughter just demonstrated more genuine compassion in 5 minutes than I've seen inferred. Years of business dealings." Carmen's eyes widened at the mention of billions of dollars, but she maintained her cautious demeanor. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card, handing it to Carmen. The card was simple but elegant. Thick stock with embossed lettering that read, "Marcus Wellington III, Chief Executive Officer, Wellington Communications." Carmen stared at the card, recognition finally dawning as she realized she was talking to one of the wealthiest men in the country. "I come to this park every morning," Marcus continued, "because it reminds me of who I used to be before I became so focused on accumulating wealth that I forgot why I wanted it in the first place. Watching your daughter today reminded me of something my own grandmother used to tell me when I was about her age. That true wealth comes from what you give away, not what you keep for yourself. Maya, who had been listening to this conversation with growing fascination, suddenly spoke up. That sounds like something my abuela would have said. She was always talking about different kinds of being rich. Marcus turned his full attention to the little girl, struck again by the wisdom in her simple words. Your grandmother sounds like she was a very smart woman. Can you tell me more about what she taught you? She said that some people spend their whole lives trying to fill up a hole inside them with money and things. But the hole just gets bigger because they're using the wrong stuff. Maya explained with the earnest tone of someone repeating a cherished lesson. She said the only thing that actually fills up the hole is love and kindness and helping other people feel better. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, carrying with them the force of absolute truth delivered with childlike simplicity. He thought about his own life, the endless pursuit of the next deal, the next acquisition, the next milestone that was supposed to make him feel complete but never quite did. He thought about his empty mansion, his lack of close relationships, the way he had gradually isolated himself behind walls of wealth and success. Your grandmother was absolutely right, he said quietly, feeling something shift fundamentally inside his chest. And I think she would be very proud of how well you learned her lessons. Carmen was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the surreal nature of this conversation. One of the richest men in America was sitting on a park bench with her and her daughter, talking about life philosophy and praising Maya's character. It felt like something that happened to other people, not to single mothers who cleaned offices and lived paycheck to paycheck. Mr. Wellington, she said carefully, I appreciate your kind words about Maya, but I'm not sure why you're telling us all this. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would sound impossible, maybe even like some kind of elaborate scam. Because I want to do something for your family. Something that might seem hard to believe, but that I mean completely seriously. I've been looking for a way to use my wealth meaningfully, to make a real difference in individual lives, rather than just writing checks to large organizations. Watching Maya today showed me exactly the kind of person I want to help. Someone who demonstrates genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. He paused, gathering his thoughts and trying to find words that would convey his sincerity without sounding patronizing or overwhelming. I'd like to offer Maya a full scholarship to any school she chooses, from elementary through college, including all expenses. I'd also like to set up a trust fund that will ensure your family never has to worry about basic necessities like housing, food, or medical care again." End quote. The silence that followed this announcement was so complete that the sounds of the park, the distant traffic, children playing on swings, seemed to rush in to fill the void. Carmen stared at Marcus with an expression of complete disbelief, while Maya looked back and forth between the adults, trying to understand the significance of what had just been said. "I'm sorry," Carmen finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you just offer to pay for Maya's entire education and set up a trust fund for our family?" "I did," Marcus confirmed, his tone steady and serious. "And I meant every word of it. I've watched your daughter demonstrate the kind of character that money can't buy, and I believe that investing in her future and in your family's stability is one of the most worthwhile things I could possibly do with my resources." End quote. Carmen felt the world tilt around her. Everything she thought she knew about how life worked suddenly called into question. Things like this didn't happen to people like her, didn't happen to families who struggled to pay rent and ate homemade cookies for lunch. "But why us? You don't even know us." "I know that your daughter gave away her last meal to help a stranger," Marcus replied. "I know that she was raised with values that most people spend their entire lives trying to learn. I know that you've managed to raise an extraordinary child despite facing obvious financial challenges, which tells me everything I need to know about your character as well." End quote. Maya, who had been processing this conversation with the careful attention she gave to all important adult discussions, suddenly tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, does this mean we won't have to move away from our apartment?" The question hit Carmen like a physical blow, reminding her of all the fears and worries she had been trying to hide from her daughter. "I don't know, mija," she said honestly, her voice thick with emotion. "This is all very confusing and unexpected." Marcus felt his heart constrict at the realization of just how precarious this family's situation truly was. The child who had just demonstrated such generous spirit was facing homelessness, was living with the kind of insecurity that no 7-year-old should have to endure. Carmen, if I may ask, what exactly is your current situation? What kind of challenges are you facing? Carmen hesitated, her pride warring with her desperation, and the growing sense that this impossible conversation might actually be real. We're behind on rent, she finally admitted. My mother passed away last week, and the funeral expenses used up our savings. I work 2 jobs, but it's not quite enough to cover everything, and we got an eviction notice yesterday. The casual way she delivered this devastating information, trying to protect her daughter from the full weight of their crisis, made Marcus's chest tight with a mixture of admiration and determination. Here was a woman facing homelessness, who was still raising a child capable of extraordinary generosity, still maintaining her dignity and her daughter's sense of security even as their world crumbled around them. "How much do you owe?" he asked simply. "I don't think that's really any of your business," Carmen replied, her protective instincts flaring again. "And even if this offer of yours is real, which I'm having trouble believing, I can't just accept charity from a stranger." "It's not charity," Marcus said gently. "It's an investment. I'm investing in Maya's future because I believe she has the potential to change the world. And I'm investing in your family because you've proven that you know how to raise someone with genuine character. The world needs more people like Maya, and that only happens when families like yours have the resources to thrive." Maya had been listening to this exchange with growing understanding, and she suddenly stood up and walked over to where Sarah was still sitting on her bench across the path. Carmen started to call her back, but Marcus held up a gentle hand. "Let's see what she's doing," he suggested, curious about the child's intentions. They watched as Maya approached Sarah and engaged her in what appeared to be an intense, but brief conversation. After a few moments, Maya returned with Sarah walking beside her, the woman looking confused but willing to follow the determined little girl. "Sarah," Maya announced as they reached the bench where Marcus and Carmen sat. "This is my mama Carmen, and this is Mr. Marcus. Mr. Marcus wants to help our family, but Mama is worried about accepting help from strangers. I thought maybe you could tell her that sometimes when people offer to buy help, it's okay to say yes." Sarah looked around at the assembled group, clearly trying to understand the dynamics of the situation. "I'm sorry, I don't want to intrude on anything private." "You're not intruding," Marcus assured her, standing and extending his hand in greeting. "I'm Marcus Wellington, and I was just explaining to Carmen that I'd like to help her family because of Maya's extraordinary kindness toward you today." Sarah shook his hand, still looking confused. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. Maya did show me incredible kindness. She gave me her cookies when I was having the worst day I've had in months. But I'm not sure I understand what's happening here. Mr. Marcus says he wants to pay for my school and make sure we don't have to move away from our apartment." Maya explained with the directness that children bring to complicated adult situations. "But Mama is scared to believe him because she says things like this don't happen to people like us." Sarah's eyes widened as she looked between Marcus and Carmen, beginning to grasp the magnitude of what was being discussed. "Are you serious?" she asked Marcus. "You're really offering to help them because Maya was kind to me?" "I am completely serious," Marcus replied. "Maya demonstrated something today that I've been searching for without even realizing it. Proof that genuine goodness still exists in the world. I've spent my entire career accumulating wealth, and now I want to use it in ways that actually matter. Helping a family that has clearly done everything right, despite facing enormous challenges, seems like the most meaningful investment I could possibly make." "And crack." Sarah turned to Carmen, her expression intense with the urgency of someone who had learned hard lessons about accepting help when it was offered. "Carmen, I don't know you well, but I can tell you that your daughter is something special. What she did for me today, giving me her food when I was at my lowest point, it reminded me that there are still good people in the world. If someone wants to help your family because they recognize how extraordinary Maya is, maybe that's not charity, maybe that's just the universe acknowledging that you've been doing something right." End quote. Carmen looked at her daughter, who was watching the adult conversation with patient interest, and felt something shift inside her chest. Maya had been raised with her grandmother's values, with lessons about generosity and kindness that she had internalized so completely that giving away her last meal seemed like the natural thing to do. Maybe those same values should apply to receiving help, to accepting assistance that could secure Maya's future and allow her to continue growing into the remarkable person she was clearly meant to become. "Maya," Carmen said, kneeling down to her daughter's eye level, "what do you think about all this? This is about your future, so I want to know how you feel." Maya considered the question with the same careful attention she had given to sharing her cookies. "I think abuela would say that when someone wants to help you help other people better, that's different from regular help. Mr. Marcus isn't trying to help us because he feels sorry for us. He wants to help us because he thinks we might do good things if we had the chance." The wisdom in those words, the clear understanding of the difference between pity and investment, made Marcus's eyes burn with unexpected emotion. This child understood nuances that many adults never grasped, could articulate concepts that business school students struggled with. "That's exactly right, Maya," Marcus said, his voice rough with feeling. "I want to invest in your future because I believe you're going to do incredible things with your life, things that will help other people and make the world better. The money I'm offering isn't about charity. It's about making sure you have every opportunity to become whoever you're meant to be." Carmen stood up slowly, her decision finally crystallizing as she looked at her daughter's earnest face. "Mr. Wellington, if this offer is real, if you truly mean what you're saying, then I accept. Not for me, but for Maya. She deserves every opportunity in the world, and if you're willing to provide those opportunities, then I'm grateful beyond words." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction, unlike anything he had experienced in years of successful business deals. "It's completely real, Carmen. I'll have my lawyers draw up all the necessary paperwork, and we can meet early next week to finalize everything. In the meantime, let me take care of your immediate concerns about rent and living expenses." He pulled out his phone and made a quick call to his personal assistant, giving instructions that Carmen's landlord should be contacted immediately and all outstanding rent should be paid, along with 6 months in advance. He also arranged for a significant amount of cash to be delivered to Carmen's address that afternoon, enough to cover groceries, utilities, and any other immediate needs. As he ended the call, Maya walked over to him and took his large hand in her small one. "Mr. Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Maya. You can ask me anything." "When you help us have a better life, does that mean you'll feel happier too? Because abuela always said that the best kind of helping is when everybody feels good about it, not just the people getting helped." Marcus knelt down to Maya's level, meeting her eyes directly. "Maya, I think your grandmother was the wisest person who ever lived, and yes, helping your family is already making me happier than I've been in years. You've reminded me of something I had forgotten, that the point of having money isn't to keep it all for yourself, it's to use it to make good things happen." "So it's like sharing cookies," Maya said with a bright smile. "When you share something good, everybody gets to enjoy it more." "Exactly like sharing cookies," Marcus agreed, feeling lighter than he had in decades. "And Maya, I hope that as you grow up and have opportunities to help other people, you'll remember that feeling and keep sharing your cookies with the world." Sarah, who had been watching this exchange with tears streaming down her face, suddenly spoke up. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Wellington, I have to ask, is there any way I could earn a chance to work for your company? I've been trying to get through nursing school while working as a waitress, but my car broke down and I'm about to lose everything. I don't want charity, but if there's any way I could work for the help I need, I would be grateful." Marcus looked at Sarah with new interest, seeing past her tear-stained face and worn clothes to the determination and dignity that had carried her through obvious struggles. "What kind of nursing program are you in?" "Pediatric nursing," Sarah replied. "I want to work with children because they deserve to have people who really care about them when they're scared and hurt." "And you have a son about Maya's age?" "Yes, Alex. He's 7, and he's the reason I'm working so hard to build a better life. I want him to be proud of his mother." Marcus made another quick decision, the same kind of instant judgment that had served him well in business, but that he was now applying to more meaningful purposes. "Sarah, I'm going to make you the same offer I just made Carmen. Full support for your nursing education, plus a guaranteed position in the pediatric unit at Wellington Children's Hospital when you graduate. We can also arrange for reliable transportation and childcare while you're in school." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto the bench, overcome by the magnitude of what was being offered. "I can't believe this is happening. This morning I thought my life was falling apart, and now you're offering me everything I've been dreaming about." "Maya shared her cookies with you when you needed them most," Marcus replied. Simply. "Now I'm sharing some of my resources with both your families, because you've shown me the kind of people worth investing in." Maya clapped her hands together with delight, pleased that her simple act of kindness had somehow grown into help for both families. "See, Mama? Abuela was right. When you give good things away, even better things come back, just not always the way you expect them to." Carmen pulled her daughter into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the rapid transformation of their circumstances, but grateful beyond measure for Maya's generous heart that had made it all possible. "Your abuela would be so proud of you, Mia. You've changed our whole lives today." "I think she's watching," Maya said with the quiet confidence that children sometimes have about spiritual matters. "And I think she's happy that her cookies helped so many people feel better." Marcus stood up and looked around the park where this extraordinary morning had unfolded, feeling a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for longer than he cared to admit. He had come here out of habit, seeking a few moments of peace before another day of corporate responsibilities. But he was leaving with something infinitely more valuable. A reminder of why wealth existed in the first place, and a clear vision of how to use his resources meaningfully. "Carmen, Sarah, I want you both to know that this isn't just a one-time gesture," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of a solemn promise. "I'm making a long-term commitment to your families, and I want to be involved in watching Maya and Alex grow up, in seeing what they accomplish with the opportunities we're creating together." Over the following weeks, Marcus proved true to every word he had spoken in the park that morning. Carmen received a call from her landlord the very next day. Bewildered and grateful as he explained that her rent had been paid in full for the next year, along with a substantial deposit toward future months. The eviction notice that had been haunting her dreams was formally withdrawn, and for the first time in months, Carmen slept through the night without waking in a cold sweat about losing their home. Maya's enrollment at the prestigious Riverside Academy was expedited through Marcus's connections, and within 2 weeks, she was attending classes in bright, well-equipped classrooms with teachers who immediately recognized her exceptional emotional intelligence and natural curiosity. The transition from her underfunded public school to one of the city's premier educational institutions could have been overwhelming. But Maya approached it with the same open-hearted enthusiasm she brought to everything else in her life. "Mama, my new teacher, Mrs. Henderson, says I have something called empathy," Maya announced one evening as Carmen helped her with homework at their kitchen table. "She says it means I'm good at understanding how other people feel, and that it's a special gift that can help me do important things when I grow up." Carmen smiled as she watched her daughter carefully color in a map of the world for her geography assignment. "Your abuela always said you had a special heart, mija. I'm glad your new teachers can see it too." Mrs. Henderson also said that there are kids at school whose families don't have very much money, just like we used to not have very much money. Maya continued with the matter-of-fact tone she used for serious topics. She asked if I wanted to help start a program where kids can share lunch with other kids who might be hungry sometimes. The request didn't surprise Carmen at all. Even with their dramatically improved circumstances, Maya's fundamental nature hadn't changed. If anything, having her basic needs met seemed to have freed her to focus even more energy on helping others, as if security had given her permission to expand her circle of concern. Sarah's transformation was equally remarkable, but followed a different trajectory. Within days of their meeting in the park, she received a call from the admissions office at Wellington University's nursing program, informing her that a full scholarship had been established in her name and that she could begin classes immediately, rather than waiting for the next rigorous semester. The relief of no longer having to work double shifts as a waitress while trying to study allowed her to throw herself fully into her coursework, and her grades reflected both her natural aptitude and her newfound ability to focus without the constant stress of financial worry. "Mom, you look different," Alex observed one evening as Sarah helped him with his math homework. At 7 years old, he was perceptive enough to notice the change in his mother's demeanor. the way she smiled more easily, and no longer seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I feel different, sweetheart," Sarah admitted, ruffling his dark hair affectionately. "Remember how I used to be worried all the time about money and work and school? Well, we met some very special people who helped us, so now I can just focus on studying to become a nurse and spending time with you." "Was one of them the little girl who gave you the cookies?" Alex asked. "You told me about her, but I haven't met her yet." "Her name is Maya, and yes, she's the one who started everything," Sarah replied, her voice warm with gratitude. "Would you like to meet her?" "I'm sure she'd love to meet you too." The meeting between Maya and Alex was arranged for the following weekend at the same park where the initial encounter had taken place. Marcus had suggested the location, feeling that there was something poetically appropriate about returning to the spot where so many lives had been changed by a simple act of kindness. He arrived early, as was his habit, and settled onto his familiar bench to watch the morning unfold. Carmen and Maya were the next to arrive, Maya practically bouncing with excitement at the prospect of meeting Sarah's son. She had been asking about Alex ever since learning of his existence, curious about this other child whose life had somehow become intertwined with her own through the mysterious workings of shared generosity. "Do you think Alex will like the cookies I made?" Maya asked her mother for the third time that morning. "I followed abuela's recipe exactly, but I'm still not very good at making them look pretty." "I'm sure he'll love them," Carmen assured her daughter, though privately she marveled at how Maya had insisted on baking cookies to share, even though she now had access to any treats she could possibly want. Some fundamental aspects of her character remained unchanged, despite their improved circumstances, and Carmen was grateful for that continuity. Sarah and Alex arrived a few minutes later, the boy hanging back shyly behind his mother, while Maya approached them with her characteristic openness. "Hi, Alex," she said, offering him the bag of cookies she had prepared. "I'm Maya. Your mom helped me learn that sharing makes everything better, so I made these for you." Alex accepted the bag with wide eyes, clearly impressed by Maya's confident friendliness. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Mom told me you were really nice to her when she was sad." "She was crying because her car was broken and she couldn't get to work," Maya explained with the direct honesty that adults often found startling in children. "But now Mr. Marcus helped fix everything, so she doesn't have to be sad anymore." Marcus watched this interaction from his bench, struck once again by Maya's ability to distill complex situations into their emotional essentials. She understood that Sarah's tears had been about more than just transportation, had grasped the deeper fears about security and stability that had overwhelmed the young mother that morning in the park. The two children settled onto a blanket that Carmen had spread on the grass, sharing the cookies while their mothers caught up on the changes in their lives. Alex was quieter than Maya, more reserved in his approach to new situations, but he warmed up quickly under the influence of her genuine interest in getting to know him. "Do you like your new school?" Alex asked, having heard from his mother about Maya's recent enrollment at Riverside Academy. "It's really different from my old school," Maya replied thoughtfully. "Everything is newer, and there are more books and computers, but some of the kids there have never been poor, so they don't understand things the same way we do." "What kind of things?" Alex pressed, curious about this difference in understanding. "Like, there's this girl in my class named Jessica whose family has 3 cars, and she was complaining because her parents wouldn't buy her a 4th one just for her," Maya explained. "But when I told her that my mama and I used to walk everywhere because we didn't have any car, she looked at me like I was making it up. She couldn't believe that people actually don't have cars." Alex nodded seriously, recognizing the disconnect that Maya was describing. "Some kids at my school are like that too. They think everyone lives in big houses and goes on vacations and stuff. But now we get to learn about both kinds of living," Maya said with characteristic optimism. "We know what it's like to not have very much, and we're learning what it's like to have enough. Maybe that will help us understand more people when we grow up." Marcus found himself leaning forward to catch every word of this conversation, amazed by the philosophical depth that these 7-year-olds were bringing to questions of class and privilege. Maya's insight about experiencing both poverty and security potentially making her more empathetic to others was remarkably sophisticated, the kind of understanding that many adults never developed. Sarah noticed Marcus's intense attention to the children's conversation and walked over to where he sat. "They're pretty amazing, aren't they?" she said, settling onto the bench beside him. "They're extraordinary," Marcus agreed. "I've been thinking a lot lately about what kinds of experiences shape character, and listening to them talk makes me realize that Maya's early experiences with hardship might actually be one of her greatest strengths." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew where he was heading with this observation. "She understands what it means to do without, to make hard choices, to prioritize other people's needs over your own wants," Marcus explained, his gaze still fixed on the two children who were now trying to coax a particularly bold squirrel to take a cookie crumb from Maya's outstretched palm. "Those aren't lessons you can teach in a classroom, or buy with money. They come from lived experience, and they create a kind of wisdom that's incredibly rare. I worry sometimes that as Alex and I get more comfortable financially, he might lose some of that understanding," Sarah admitted. "I don't want our improved circumstances to make him take things for granted." Marcus nodded, having wrestled with similar concerns about how to preserve Maya's essential character while providing her with opportunities she had never imagined. "I think the key is making sure they stay connected to their roots, that they remember where they came from, and use their experiences to help others who are still struggling." As if summoned by their conversation about helping others, Maya suddenly stood up and walked over to where a homeless man had settled on a nearby bench with a cardboard sign asking for assistance. Carmen started to follow her daughter, but Marcus held up a gentle hand. "Let's see what she does," he suggested, curious about how Maya would handle this encounter, now that her own circumstances had changed so dramatically. They watched as Maya approached the man with the same careful respect she had shown Sarah on that first morning, offering him the remaining cookies from the bag she had brought for Alex. The man accepted them gratefully, and they could see Maya engaging him in what appeared to be a serious conversation about his situation and his needs. After a few minutes, Maya returned to the group with a thoughtful expression on her face. "That man's name is David, and he used to be a teacher before he got sick and lost his job," she announced. "He's really smart, and he knows a lot about history, but he doesn't have anywhere to live right now." Carmen felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with concern as she recognized the wheels turning in her daughter's mind. "Maya, what are you thinking?" I'm thinking that maybe Mr. Marcus knows about jobs for teachers, or maybe there's a way to help David get back to teaching kids again," Maya replied with the practical optimism that had become her trademark. "He told me that he misses working with children more than anything else." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion as he realized that Maya's first instinct upon learning about David's background had been to think about how his skills could be put to use helping others, rather than simply feeling sorry for his current circumstances. She had looked past his homeless appearance to see his potential value as an educator, had immediately begun thinking about solutions rather than just problems. "Maya, would you be willing to introduce me to David?" Marcus asked, standing up from the bench. "I'd like to hear more about his background and his situation." The conversation that followed exceeded even Marcus's elevated expectations for the day. David turned out to be a former high school history teacher with a master's degree in education, who had been forced to leave his position when a chronic illness made it impossible for him to maintain the demanding schedule that teaching required. Without steady income, he had gradually lost his apartment, his car, and eventually his hope of returning to the profession he loved. "I've been living on the streets for 8 months now," David explained to Marcus with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to tell his story without self-pity. "I keep applying for teaching positions, but it's hard to present well when you don't have a permanent address or access to regular showers and clean clothes." Marcus found himself thinking about the various educational initiatives that Wellington Communications had funded over the years. Programs that had focused on technology and infrastructure, but had never addressed the more fundamental need for passionate, experienced educators. "David, what would you need to get back into teaching? Not just the practical things, but what kind of support would help you rebuild your career?" "Honestly, just a chance," David replied with a mixture of hope and caution in his voice. "I know I can still teach. I know I can still connect with kids and help them understand that learning can be exciting. I just need someone to look past my current circumstances and see when I could contribute." Maya, who had been listening to this conversation with the intense focus she brought to all important adult discussions, suddenly spoke up. Mr. Marcus, didn't you tell my mama that you like to invest in people who want to help other people? David wants to help kids learn, just like you're helping me and Alex learn. Maybe that's the same kind of thing. The simple logic of Maya's observation hit Marcus with the force of revelation. He had been so focused on helping individual families that he hadn't considered the broader impact of investing in someone like David, whose recovery could potentially benefit hundreds of students over the course of his remaining career. Maya had instinctively understood that helping one teacher was really helping all the children. The teacher would eventually reach. David, I'd like to make you an offer, Marcus said, his decision crystallizing with the same sudden clarity he had experienced when first deciding to help Carmen and Sarah. Wellington Communications has partnerships with several schools in the area, and we're always looking for ways to support quality education. I'd like to provide you with housing, professional clothing, and whatever other support you need to get back into teaching. In return, I'd ask that you consider working with our educational outreach programs and sharing your experience with other teachers who are facing challenges. David stared at Marcus in disbelief, his eyes filling with tears that he tried unsuccessfully to hide. Are you serious? You would do that for me? Maya reminded me that investing in teachers is really investing in all the students they'll teach throughout their careers, Marcus replied, glancing at the little girl who had once again opened his eyes to possibilities he hadn't considered. It seems like one of the most impactful investments I could possibly make. Carmen watched this exchange with a growing sense of awe at the ripple effects that had grown from her daughter's simple act of kindness. In the space of a few weeks, Maya's willingness to share her cookies with a crying stranger had led to life-changing opportunities for multiple families. And now it was extending even further, to touch the life of a homeless teacher and all the students he would eventually reach. Mama, Maya said, tugging on Carmen's sleeve, do you think abuela knew that her cookies would help so many people? Carmen knelt down to her daughter's level, thinking about her mother's unwavering faith and the power of small acts of kindness to create large changes in the world. I think abuela knew that when you do something good with a pure heart, it spreads out in ways you can't even imagine. She always said that kindness was like ripples in a pond, reaching places you never expected. So David will teach kids, and those kids will learn to help other people, and then those people will help even more people, Maya said, working through the chain of positive consequences that her action had set in motion. It's like the cookies keep getting shared even after they're all eaten up. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as he listened to Maya's understanding of how individual actions could cascade into broader social change. She had grasped something that had taken him decades to learn. The true wealth came not from accumulating resources, but from using them to create opportunities for others to flourish and contribute to the world. Over the following months, the transformations in all their lives continued to unfold in ways that exceeded even Marcus's ambitious expectations. David was provided with a comfortable apartment and quickly found a position teaching at an alternative high school that served students who had struggled in traditional academic settings. His combination of subject matter expertise and personal experience with hardship made him extraordinarily effective at connecting with teenagers who felt disconnected from the educational system. Sarah excelled in her nursing program, her grades reflecting both her natural aptitude and her deep commitment to caring for sick children. She often spoke about how Maya's generosity had given her the courage to believe that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but rather an opportunity to become strong enough to help others in turn. Maya thrived at Riverside Academy, her academic performance matching her emotional maturity as she discovered a particular gift for writing and storytelling. Her teachers noted that her essays and creative writing assignments invariably focused on themes of connection, compassion, and the ways that individuals could make positive differences in their communities. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself, who found that his new approach to wealth and philanthropy had transformed not only the lives of those he helped, but his own sense of purpose and fulfillment. He began spending more time in direct contact with the people and programs he supported, moving away from the distance and abstraction that had characterized his previous charitable giving. You know, Marcus said to Carmen during one of their regular check-in meetings, when I first offered to help your family, I thought I was doing it purely for altruistic reasons. But I'm beginning to realize that Maya and all the people she's inspired me to help have given me something far more valuable than what I've given them." "What's that?" Carmen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "A sense of meaning," Marcus replied simply. "For 40 years, I built wealth without really understanding why. Now I know that money is just a tool, and its value comes entirely from how you use it to create positive change in the world." End quote. Maya, who was working on homework at the kitchen table while the adults talked, looked up from her math assignment with the bright expression that meant she had something important to contribute to the conversation. "Mr. Marcus, that sounds like what abuela used to say about cookies. She said the ingredients by themselves were just flour and sugar and butter. But when you mixed them together with love and shared them with people who needed them, they became something magical." End quote. The comparison between money and cookie ingredients struck Marcus as profoundly apt. Another example of Maya's ability to find the essential truth in any situation. "Maya, your grandmother would be proud to see how well you've learned her lessons and how many people you've helped by following her example." "I think she is proud," Maya said, with the quiet confidence that had become one of her most endearing characteristics. "Sometimes, when I'm doing something kind for someone, I can almost feel her smiling." As the first anniversary of their meeting in the park approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had been set in motion by a 7-year-old girl's decision to share her last cookies with a crying stranger. The ripple effects had expanded far beyond anything he could have imagined, touching dozens of lives and creating a network of mutual support and generosity that continued to grow with each passing month. David had not only returned to teaching, but had also begun mentoring other educators who were facing personal and professional challenges. Sarah was nearing completion of her nursing program and had already been accepted into the pediatric unit at Wellington Children's Hospital, where she would begin working immediately after graduation. Alex had flourished under the influence of Maya's friendship, developing his own sense of empathy and social responsibility that manifested in small but meaningful acts of kindness toward his classmates and neighbors. And Maya herself continued to grow into the remarkable young woman that Marcus had recognized in her from the very beginning. Using her improved circumstances, not as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but as a platform for expanding her ability to help others. She had started a program at Riverside Academy where students could donate books and school supplies to children at underfunded schools, and she volunteered regularly at the local food bank, always insisting on working directly with the families who came for assistance rather than just sorting donations in the back room. On the morning of the anniversary, Marcus made his way to the park bench where he had first witnessed Maya's act of kindness. Carrying with him a leather-bound journal that contained the stories of all the people whose lives had been changed by that moment, he had been documenting the ripple effects of Maya's generosity, creating a record that he hoped would serve as inspiration for others who doubted the power of individual actions to create meaningful change. Carmen and Maya arrived shortly after he did, Maya carrying a fresh batch of cookies that she had baked using her grandmother's recipe. Over the past year, she had continued to perfect her technique, and while the cookies still weren't perfectly uniform, they carried the same love and care that had made her grandmother's baking so special. "Happy anniversary, Mr. Marcus," Maya said, offering him one of the cookies with a smile that could have lit up the entire park. "I made these to celebrate the day everything started changing for the better." Marcus accepted the cookie gratefully, thinking about how much had transformed since that first morning when he had been just another wealthy man sitting alone on a park bench, disconnected from any sense of deeper purpose. "Maya, do you realize how many people's lives are better today because you decided to share your cookies with Sarah a year ago?" Maya considered the question with the same thoughtful attention she brought to all important topics. "I know about Sarah and Alex and David and all the kids that David teaches now, but I think there are probably more people that I don't even know about. When you do something good, it spreads out like circles in water, and you can't always see how far the circles go." "That's exactly right," Marcus confirmed, opening his journal to show her some of the entries he had made about the various programs and initiatives that had grown out of their initial meeting. David has now taught over 200 students who might have dropped out of school without his influence. Sarah is going to begin her career helping sick children heal and feel safe. Your book donation program has provided supplies to over 1,000 kids in underfunded schools. And all of it started because you saw someone who was sad and decided to share what you had. Maya listened to this recitation of positive outcomes with a mixture of wonder and humility, clearly amazed by the scope of change that had grown from her simple decision to be kind. Abuela always said that you never know how big a little bit of love can grow, but I never imagined it could grow this big. Carmen, who had been quietly observing this conversation between her daughter and the man who had become like family to them over the past year, felt her eyes fill with tears of gratitude and pride. Maya, your abuela would be so proud to see the woman you're becoming and the difference you're making in the world. I hope so, Maya said softly. I try to remember everything she taught me about sharing and caring and looking out for people who need help. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing it right. Marcus reached over and gently took Maya's small hand in his larger one, thinking about all the ways she had exceeded even his highest expectations over the past year. Maya, you're not just doing it right, you're teaching the rest of us how it should be done. You've shown me that true wealth isn't about accumulating money, it's about using whatever resources you have to help others flourish. You've changed my life just as much as I've changed yours. As they sat together on the bench where it had all begun, sharing cookies and reflecting on the extraordinary year that had passed, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with business success or financial achievement. He had finally found the answer to the question that had been haunting him for decades. The question of what to do with wealth once you had acquired it. The answer, as Maya had shown him, was beautifully simple. You shared it with people who would use it to make the world better, and then you watched as their kindness created ripples that reached far beyond anything you could have imagined. Maya finished her cookie and brushed the crumbs from her hands, then stood up and walked over to the pond where the ducks were gathered in the morning sunshine. She pulled a small bag of breadcrumbs from her pocket, the same kind of simple treat she had been sharing with the ducks on that first morning when everything had changed. Come on, Mr. Marcus, she called over her shoulder. The ducks remember us, and they're waiting for breakfast. Marcus stood up and joined Maya at the water's edge, watching as she carefully distributed the breadcrumbs to ensure that every duck got its fair share. It was such a small thing, such a simple act of consideration, but it perfectly encapsulated everything he had learned about kindness over the past year. True generosity wasn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It was about paying attention to the needs around you and responding with whatever resources you had available, whether that was billions of dollars or a handful of cookie crumbs. As the last of the bread disappeared into eager beaks and the ducks paddled away across the pond, Maya turned to Marcus with the bright smile that had become one of his favorite sights in the world. Thank you for helping my family, Mr. Marcus. And thank you for letting me help you learn about sharing too. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as he realized that Maya had understood something that had taken him much longer to grasp, that the relationship between giver and receiver was far more complex and reciprocal than it appeared on the surface. She had given him purpose, meaning, and a sense of connection to something larger than himself, gifts that were every bit as valuable as the financial security he had provided her family. Thank you, Maya, he replied, his voice rough with feeling. Thank you for showing me what wealth really means, and for teaching me that the best investment anyone can make is in the kindness of others. As they walked back toward the park entrance, Marcus reflected on the profound truth that had emerged from this unlikely friendship between a billionaire and a 7-year-old girl. Money, power, and success meant nothing if they weren't used in service of human connection and compassion. Maya had demonstrated that true wealth lay not in what you accumulated, but in what you shared. Not in what you kept for yourself, but in what you gave away. The little girl who had handed her last cookie to a crying stranger had changed not only her own life, but the lives of countless others, creating a legacy of kindness that would continue to spread long after the original act had been forgotten. She had proven that the most powerful force in the world wasn't money or technology or political influence, but the simple human capacity for empathy and generosity. And as Marcus walked beside Maya through the morning sunshine, listening to her excited chatter about her plans for helping more people in the year ahead, he knew that he had found something far more valuable than any business deal or financial achievement. He had found his purpose, his meaning, and his joy. all wrapped up in the wisdom of a little girl who understood that the secret to a rich life was learning how to share your cookies with the world. 2 years later, Maya's influence had grown beyond anything Marcus could have anticipated when he first witnessed her simple act of generosity. Now 9 years old, she had developed into a natural leader at Riverside Academy, where her teachers marveled at her ability to inspire compassion in even the most self-centered of her wealthy classmates. The book donation program she had started had evolved into a comprehensive mentorship system, pairing students from privileged backgrounds with children from underserved communities. "Maya, the board of directors would like to meet with you," announced Mrs. Patterson, the principal of Riverside Academy, as she approached Maya during lunch period. Maya was sitting with a group of classmates who were planning their next community service project. Her enthusiasm infectious as she outlined strategies for collecting winter coats for homeless families. "Did I do something wrong?" Maya asked with the slight worry that even confident children feel when summoned to administrative offices. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly, her expression reassuring. "Quite the opposite. They want to discuss establishing a formal foundation based on your community outreach initiatives. Mr. Wellington has been sharing your impact metrics with them, and they're impressed by the measurable changes your programs have created." Maya's eyes brightened with curiosity rather than pride, her first thought focusing on how a foundation might expand her ability to help others, rather than on the recognition it represented for her own efforts. "Would a foundation mean we could help more families like Sarah's and David's?" "Much more," Mrs. Patterson confirmed. "They're talking about scaling your models to reach children across multiple states, maybe even internationally." That evening, Maya sat at her family's dinner table, which had expanded significantly since their early days of financial struggle. Carmen had quit her second job and now worked part-time at a nonprofit organization that Marcus had helped establish, focusing on connecting families in crisis with resources and support networks. Their apartment had been replaced by a modest but comfortable house in a neighborhood where Maya could walk safely to friends' homes and, quote, community centers. "Mama, what does it mean when adults want to make your ideas bigger?" Maya asked as Carmen served homemade enchiladas, a recipe that had become their traditional celebration meal for important family discussions. Carmen paused in her serving, considering how to explain the complexities of institutional scaling to her 9-year-old daughter. "It means they think your ideas are so good that they want to help more children benefit from them. But it also means the projects might become more complicated, with more rules and meetings and paperwork." "But would it still be about helping people who are sad or hungry or lonely?" Maya pressed, her concern evident in her furrowed brow. "Because that's the most important part." "That would always be the most important part," Carmen assured her. "Mr. Marcus has promised that any foundation bearing your name would stay focused on direct impact rather than just moving money around." The meeting with the board of directors took place the following week in Wellington Communications Executive Conference Room, a space designed to intimidate with its floor-to-ceiling windows, polished mahogany table, and leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Maya entered wearing her school uniform, her backpack containing several handwritten thank you letters from families who had benefited from her various initiatives. Marcus had coached her gently about what to expect, explaining that these were serious business people who spoke in numbers and projections rather than stories and emotions. "Just be yourself," he had advised. "Tell them why this work matters to you, and let them see the person behind the programs." The 12 board members, equally split between men and women, represented decades of corporate experience and millions of dollars in collective wealth. They had reviewed spreadsheets detailing the measurable outcomes of Maya's projects, cost-benefit analyses of scaling her approaches, and demographic studies of target populations. What they hadn't expected was the immediate shift in the room's energy when Maya began speaking about her motivations. "My abuela used to say that loneliness is the worst kind of poverty," Maya began, her voice clear and confident despite the intimidating setting. "She taught me that when you see someone who looks empty inside, you should try to fill them up with kindness, even if you don't have very much to give." Board member Margaret Chen, a woman known for her analytical approach to philanthropy, found herself leaning forward with unexpected interest. "Maya, Can you tell us more about how you identify children who might be experiencing this kind of loneliness? It's in their eyes mostly, Maya replied with the matter-of-fact tone she used for obvious truths. Kids who feel forgotten have this look like they're trying to disappear, like they think nobody will notice if they just fade away. But when you pay attention to them and show them they matter, their eyes light up again. Board member Jonathan Rivers, who had initially been skeptical about involving a child in foundation planning, felt something shift in his understanding of what they were attempting to accomplish. How do you know when your interventions are working? What tells you that you're making a real difference? Maya considered this question with the same thoughtfulness she brought to all important topics. When kids stop trying to be invisible and start helping other kids feel visible too. When they go from being helped to being helpers. When they learn that feeling good about yourself comes from making other people feel good about themselves. The simplicity and wisdom of her response created a moment of profound silence in the room. 12 sophisticated adults grappling with the realization that this 9-year-old had articulated something they had been struggling to quantify through data and metrics. She understood intuitively that sustainable philanthropy created cycles of empowerment rather than dependency, that true success was measured by the multiplication of compassion, rather than just the distribution of resources. Maya, said board chair Victoria Adams, her voice softer than her usual boardroom tone. What would you want this foundation to accomplish that you can't accomplish on your own? Maya's face brightened with the enthusiasm she always showed when discussing possibilities for expanded impact. I want to teach other kids how to notice when people need help, and I want to give them the tools to actually help. Instead of just feeling sorry, I want to create networks where families can support each other, instead of everyone struggling alone. And I want to show adults that kids have really good ideas about fixing problems. We just usually don't get asked. The foundation that emerged from these discussions was unlike anything the board members had previously encountered in their philanthropic experiences. Rather than focusing solely on direct service delivery, the Maya Rodriguez Foundation emphasized peer-to-peer support networks, community-driven solutions, and the systematic cultivation of empathy among younger people. Maya insisted on maintaining hands-on involvement in program design and implementation, refusing to become merely a symbolic figurehead for initiatives developed by adults. Sarah, now a registered pediatric nurse at Wellington Children's Hospital, became the foundation's first full-time employee, serving as a bridge between Maya's visionary thinking and the practical requirements of the institutional healthcare partnerships. Her own transformation from struggling single mother to confident professional provided powerful testimony to the foundation's core belief that sustainable change required addressing both immediate needs and long-term capacity building. Maya changed my life, but more importantly, she taught me how to change other people's lives, Sarah explained to a group of potential donors during the foundation's first major fundraising event. She showed me that receiving help gracefully is just the first step toward becoming someone who can offer help effectively. David, the formerly homeless teacher whom Maya had connected with Marcus, had become the foundation's education director, developing curricula that taught emotional intelligence alongside academic subjects. His programs were being piloted in schools across 3 states, with preliminary results showing significant improvements in student empathy scores, peer conflict resolution, and overall classroom emotional climate. Maya understood something that took me years to learn as an educator, David told a conference of teachers and administrators. She knew that children learn compassion best by practicing it, not by being lectured about it. Her approach integrates service learning so naturally that kids don't even realize they're being taught to care about others. They just discover that caring feels good. Alex, now 10 years old and Maya's closest friend, had developed his own leadership style that complemented Maya's more intuitive approach. Where Maya excelled at emotional connection and visionary thinking, Alex demonstrated remarkable organizational skills and strategic planning abilities. Together, they had created a youth advisory council that gave children meaningful input into foundation priorities and program development. Adults always think they know what kids need, but they usually forget to ask actual kids what we think. Alex observed during a foundation board meeting where he and Maya were presenting their latest initiative. Maya taught me that kids can solve problems that adults can't solve because we see things differently. The initiative they were proposing involved creating buddy bridges between children from different socioeconomic backgrounds, structured interactions designed to build understanding across class lines, while avoiding the patronizing dynamics that often characterize traditional Baal charity relationships. Maya had developed the concept after observing tensions at Riverside Academy between scholarship students and their wealthier classmates. Kids from families with money need to learn that being rich isn't about having more stuff, it's about having more opportunities to help, Maya explained to the board. And kids from families without money need to learn that they have valuable things to share too, like resilience and creativity and different ways of solving problems. Marcus watched Maya's presentation with the same sense of awe he had experienced that first day in the park, amazed by her continued growth and the sophistication of her thinking about complex social issues. At 65 years old, he had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Wellington Communications to focus entirely on philanthropic work, finding that supporting Maya's vision provided more satisfaction than any business achievement in his previous career. Maya, how do you maintain optimism when you encounter problems that seem too big to solve? Asked board member Dr. Patricia Wilson, a woman who had spent decades working in international development and had grown somewhat cynical about the possibility of creating lasting change. Maya paused to consider the question, her expression growing serious as she thought about the various challenges she had encountered in her expanding work. Abuela used to tell me that you can't clean a whole house all at once, but you can clean one room really well, and then you can clean another room really well, and eventually the whole house is clean. Big problems are just lots of little problems stuck together, so you have to separate them and fix them one at a time." End quote. Dr. Wilson felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of professional frustration that had been tightening over years of witnessing well-intentioned programs fail due to their scope and complexity. That's a remarkably sophisticated approach to systems change. Have you thought about how to ensure that your clean rooms don't get messy again after you move on to the next one? That's why you have to teach people how to keep cleaning, Maya replied, with the confidence of someone who had thought deeply about sustainability. You can't just clean for people, you have to show them how to clean for themselves, and how to teach other people to clean too. That way, the cleaning keeps happening even when you're not there anymore. End. The metaphor resonated throughout the room, providing a framework for understanding how the Foundation's approach differed from traditional charity models. Rather than simply providing services, they were building capacity for communities to address their own challenges while maintaining connections to broader support networks. 6 months after the Foundation's official launch, Maya received an invitation that would test her understanding of her own growing influence. The United Nations had heard about her work through Dr. Wilson's connections in international development circles, and they wanted Maya to address a special session on child welfare and poverty reduction. "They want me to talk to people from all over the world?" Maya asked Marcus as they reviewed the invitation together in his home office, which had been transformed from a shrine to business achievement into a workspace dedicated to philanthropic planning. "Representatives from almost every country on Earth," Marcus confirmed. "They're particularly interested in your peer-to-peer support models and your ideas about empowering children as agents of social change, rather than just recipients of aid." Maya absorbed this information with characteristic thoughtfulness, clearly weighing the opportunity against her concerns about becoming too removed from direct service work. "Will I still have time to visit families and work with kids directly? Because that's where I learn the most important things." "We'll make sure you maintain that connection," Marcus promised. "In fact, I think your speech will be more powerful if you can share recent stories from your hands-on work, rather than just talking about policies and programs." The preparation for Maya's UN address became a family affair, with Carmen helping her organize her thoughts into a coherent narrative, while Marcus provided context about international development, challenges, and diplomatic protocol. Sarah contributed insights from her healthcare work, and David offered perspectives on educational approaches in different cultural contexts. Alex played a particularly important role in the preparation process, serving as Maya's practice audience and offering feedback on which stories resonated most strongly with other children. His questions helped Maya anticipate potential challenges from delegates who might be skeptical about taking guidance from a 10-year-old American girl. Maya, what if people say that your ideas only work in rich countries like America? Alex asked during one of their rehearsal sessions. What if they say that kids in really poor places don't have time to help other kids because they're too busy trying to survive? Maya considered this challenge seriously, recognizing the validity of Alex's concern. I think that's exactly when kids need to help each other the most. When you're scared or hungry or don't have a safe place to live. Having someone who understands and cares about you might be the only thing that keeps you going. Rich kids have lots of ways to feel better when they're sad, but poor kids mostly just have each other. Her response demonstrated the depth of empathy she had developed through her own experiences with financial insecurity, combined with the broader perspective she had gained through her foundation work. She understood viscerally that community support became more crucial rather than less crucial as material conditions deteriorated. The day of Maya's UN address arrived with unexpected media attention, as news outlets had picked up the story of the youngest person ever invited to address a special session on child welfare. Maya wore a simple blue dress that Carmen had chosen for its balance of formality and age-appropriateness, her hair braided in the same style her grandmother had favored. Standing at the podium in the General Assembly Hall, surrounded by delegates from 193 member nations, Maya felt a moment of overwhelming awareness of the magnitude of the platform she had been given. Then, she thought about her grandmother's lessons about focusing on the person in front of you rather than the crowd around you, and she began to speak with the same authentic voice she used in one-on-one conversations. When I was 7 years old, I had 2 cookies left from a batch my grandmother had made before she died, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I was hungry, and those cookies were all the food I had brought with me that day, but I saw a woman crying on a park bench, and I knew that her hunger was bigger than mine. The delegates, accustomed to presentations filled with statistics and policy recommendations, found themselves drawn into Maya's narrative in ways they hadn't expected. Her story had the power of lived experience, combined with the clarity of a child's perspective on complex adult problems. What I learned that day is that poverty isn't just about not having enough money, Maya continued. Poverty is about feeling invisible, feeling like nobody notices when you're struggling, or cares whether you succeed or fail. The most important thing I gave that woman wasn't the cookies. It was the message that she mattered enough for someone to pay attention to her pain. End quote. Delegate after delegate found themselves reconsidering their assumptions about effective aid strategies, as Maya described the foundation's peer-to-peer support models and the measurable outcomes they had achieved by focusing on relationship building rather than just resource distribution. Her presentation included video testimonials from children in various programs, their faces glowing with the confidence that came from being empowered to help others rather than just receive help. Children understand things that adults sometimes forget, Maya concluded, her gaze sweeping across the assembly with remarkable composure for someone who had just turned 10 years old. We understand that being helped feels good for a little while. But helping someone else feels good forever. We understand that the best way to solve big problems is to teach lots of people how to solve little problems. And we understand that everybody has something valuable to buy, share, even when they think they have nothing. End quote. The standing ovation that followed Maya's speech lasted for over 5 minutes, with delegates from countries that rarely agreed on anything united in their recognition of the wisdom she had shared. More importantly, the address led to concrete commitments from 17 nations to pilot versions of the Foundation's programs adapted to their specific cultural contexts and resource constraints. Following the UN speech, Maya's influence continued to expand in directions that even Marcus's ambitious vision hadn't anticipated. Universities began inviting her to speak to education and social work students, recognizing that her insights could inform professional practice in ways that traditional academic training often missed. Corporate leaders sought her input on employee engagement and company culture initiatives, intrigued by her understanding of motivation and human connection. But Maya remained grounded in her original commitment to direct service, insisting on spending at least 2 days each week working directly with children and families rather than just talking about helping them. These hands-on experiences continued to inform and refine her thinking about effective intervention strategies, ensuring that her growing platform remained anchored in authentic relationships rather than abstract theories. Maya, how do you stay connected to the work when so many people want to put you on stages and in boardrooms? Asked Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a researcher studying Maya's approach for a book about child-led social change movements. Stages and boardrooms are just tools for helping more people, Maya replied, her tone matter-of-fact as she continued sorting donated books for the Foundation's latest literacy initiative. But if I stopped actually helping people myself, I would forget why the tools matter. Besides, the best ideas always come from listening to kids and families about what they really need, not from thinking about what I think they need. This commitment to maintaining direct contact with beneficiaries had become one of the Foundation's defining characteristics, distinguishing it from larger philanthropic organizations that relied primarily on intermediary agencies and professional service providers. Maya insisted that every Foundation employee spend at least 20% of their time in direct contact with program participants, a policy that had initially seemed impractical but had proven invaluable for maintaining program responsiveness and relevance. Carmen, who had become the Foundation's community engagement coordinator, marveled at how her daughter's influence had grown while her essential character remained unchanged. Sometimes I watch Maya in these important meetings with powerful people, and I still see the same little girl who gave away her cookies because she couldn't stand to see someone crying. Carmen told Sarah during one of their regular coffee conversations. That's exactly why she's so effective, Sarah replied, bouncing her 18-month-old daughter on her knee. She never lost sight of the emotional core of the work. She understands that all the strategy and structure in the world doesn't matter if you're not genuinely connecting with people's hearts. Sarah's daughter, Emma, had become something of a Foundation mascot, her presence in the office serving as a constant reminder of the next generation that would inherit the world Maya's generation was working to improve. Maya often spoke about her hopes for Emma's generation, children who would grow up expecting collaboration across difference and taking for granted the possibility of solving complex social problems through collective action. I want Emma to live in a world where helping each other isn't unusual or noteworthy, Maya told Sarah one afternoon as they watched the toddler play with blocks in the Foundation's child-friendly meeting space. I want her to think it's weird when people don't share what they have with people who need it. These conversations about generational change had led Maya to develop what she called future thinking workshops, sessions where children were encouraged to imagine the world they wanted to live in as adults, and then work backward to identify the changes that would need to happen to create that reality. The workshops had proven remarkably effective at motivating sustained engagement in community service, as participants developed personal stakes in long-term social transformation. Alex had become particularly skilled at facilitating these future thinking sessions, his organizational abilities proving perfect for helping groups of children translate their visions into actionable steps. Maya taught me that dreams without plans are just wishes, he explained to a group of new youth volunteers. But plans without dreams are just chores. You need both to actually change anything important. The partnership between Maya and Alex had evolved into a powerful model for collaborative leadership, their different strengths complementing each other in ways that amplified their individual effectiveness. Maya's intuitive understanding of emotional dynamics, combined with Alex's strategic thinking, created a leadership style that other young people found both inspiring and achievable. As Maya's 11th birthday approached, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a little girl's decision to share her last cookies with a crying stranger. The foundation bearing her name now operated programs in 8 countries, had influenced policy discussions at national and international levels, and had directly impacted the lives of over 50,000 children and their families. But perhaps more importantly, Maya had demonstrated that age was no barrier to meaningful social leadership, that wisdom could emerge from experience rather than just education, and that the most powerful force for positive change was the simple human capacity for noticing suffering and responding with compassion. She had proven that true wealth lay not in accumulation but in circulation, not in having more but in giving more, not in standing above others but in lifting others up.